This is lesson 9-4, solving quadratic equations by graphing. Alright, so to solve a quadratic equation by graphing, you're going to need to follow these simple steps. Number one, you're going to need to find the axis of symmetry. Number two, you're going to need to plug that axis back into the equation to find your vertex. And number three, you're going to need to find one or two more points that you can graph, and then you're obviously going to reflect that to the other side, which is step 4. So this is step 1, and to find your axis of symmetry, you're going to need to follow this simple formula, opposite b over 2a. So we're going to need to plug in those two values, b and a. But what are those? A is the x squared value, and b is the x value. So we're going to need to, so once we plug that in here, we'll end up getting -2. Now note that the opposite cancels out the -1, which will end up making a -2, but you'll also have the -4, so it does be -2. And as you can see on the graph here, we have our axis of symmetry, which is at the point of -2. We don't know if it's higher, we don't know if it's lower. So step number 2, we need to plug the axis back into the equation to find our vertex. So here we have our equation, and the vertex is going to be what happens when you substitute your axis, which is the x value, into your equation. So you just substitute the axis of symmetry into the equation where the x's are, and you'll end up getting your answer. For us, it was 0. So we're going to have a vertex of -2, 0. And as you can see on our graph, that's where we're going to be the maximum or the minimum of the graph, where the highest or lowest point is. So step number 3, we're almost done here. We need to find one or two more points that we can graph using a table of values, and then we're going to reflect. Alright, so here we have our equation, and we have our vertex there, -2, 0. So let's go ahead and substitute something into the x value, something easy like 0. So that would be a y-intercept where x equals 0, so we would get -4. And then let's say we substitute something else in like -1. Now the reason we're going to use a -1 is because the maximum or the minimum is on the negative side. So when you're doing that, whichever side it's on, you're going to use that type of a symbol to represent your number. Alright, so then once you plug in -1, you would get -1, ironically, for your y value. And then, as you can see there, we graph -1 and we graph 0, -4 on there. And then, since everything is symmetrical on one side because of the axis of symmetry, we're going to reflect it over to the other side, and there we go. We have found our parabola, and we are finished solving a quadratic function by graphing. Alright, so do you think you guys understand this? See if you can. See if you can do our assessment question. This film was narrated by Trainer, was filmed by Joe, and was controlled by Michael. Thank you all for watching.